there.
Well, welcome to the June 28th, 2022 session of Tangerine SDR and Hamside technical session. My name is Dave, KV0S, and this week has been a little bit, well, I had to go to a funeral in the family in St. Louis and had to go do some other tasks around town. So I didn't get, and I was reorganizing my computer room here. So other than that, I didn't get a lot of other radio work done, but I think I'm ready to go now. So that's it for me. Nathaniel, do you have more? You want to talk about what you just showed without, but was not recorded?
Sure. So I guess I have a lot of updates. As I showed earlier, we've been granted a fairly substantial grant from the ARDC to install a new ham station at the University of Scranton, and I've gotten all the administrative approval, and they've turned on the funding. So we got that notification as of last week. So we are now in the process. I got initial quotes and initial plan from the antenna builder and the person who's designing the station. He's both a ham and a professional antenna radio person. So we got the initial quotes from him. So now we're going to actually get the real quotes and the real planning and go. So hopefully by the plan, my goal is to have it open in time for the March Hamside workshop. So we will see, which will hopefully be in Scranton this year. So we will see if this all comes true, but time will tell, and I'll keep working on it. The other good thing is 2 weeks ago, I was at the, well, you saw, we were at Youth on the Air with Veronica. So everyone saw that. That went really well. And then last week, I took a whole bunch of us went to the NSF-CDR workshop, which I know Dave thinks should have something to do with forestry, but it really is coupling of energetics and dynamics of atmospheric regions, which rolls right off the tongue. So we had Bill Engelke there with us, Christina Collins was there, Diego, Veronica, Simmel, Francis Kung, Gareth Perry, they were all there, and I think all the presentations went very well. I got a lot of very positive feedback from the community. They seem to be happy with what we're doing. So I think that's all good. So also some interesting things. We had dinner with the chief scientist of HARP, which yes, so I know many of you are familiar with HARP, which is the world's most powerful HF transmitter, with 3.6 megawatts of output power into an array that will give you up to 3,600 megawatts of EIRP in a fully steerable electronically phased array where you can control all of the polarization independently. It's quite a fantastic system. So they got a recent NSF grant that will let people submit their own requests for experiments, which would normally cost $5,000 an hour. So if anyone here wants to dream up some sort of experiment that they would like run on HARP, you can let us know, and we can try to work with you on getting an experiment from the amateur radio community on there. So I think experiment proposals for this year are due, I think they're either August 1st or at the end of August. So we have about a month to kind of figure that out. But that's very interesting. And Steve Serwin, he lives about 2 hours away. So he came and visited us for a day, and he got to sit down with Paul Bernhardt of HARP and all of that. So yeah, it was a really good week.
We should also mention that Diego won poster competition, came in honorable mention, I think top 5 out of about 70 posters.
Yeah, Diego got honorable mention in the undergraduate category for posters. So that was really good news. And we also found out this morning that Veronica won a $25,000 ARDC scholarship. So we're doing okay.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. So back to net.
Okay, well, next on the list is Jules, KG2, K2 KGJ.
Yeah, hi group. Of course, field day was this weekend, and I decided to wait until midday on Saturday and then throw up a essentially a quote emergency unquote NFED half wave for 80 on down, or 80 on up, rather, we should say, and took the KX3 out with a solar charger and a battery pack, and worked over the rest of that afternoon and early on Sunday morning, probably about 100 contacts total, 80 through 10. And just to see how quickly I could set up a station, how effective the antenna was on those bands, and just basically for practice, not to do anything real on field day. The other thing I'm working on here relative to the to AMSI is a slightly different way of stabilizing temperature on the magnetometer by burying a copper plate, a square copper plate down around 24 to 30 inches with a vertical riser, copper tube riser, 1.5 inches in diameter, filled with antifreeze as kind of a heat pipe to produce a temperature stable region in a insulated box at ground level. So yeah, you still have to excavate, but your equipment will be located, if that works, your equipment will be located at ground level, easily accessible, easy to modify, easy to change. The most expensive part is the 2 pieces of copper, but still not all that bad, about $100. But we'll see how that works. I'm going to do that this summer and just take some measurements and see how it actually functions. Back to net.
Very good. Next on the list is Bill, ABJ, AB4EJ. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, the last week was composed of the CEDAR meeting and CEDAR meeting. But today I've been working on adding some stuff to the central control system to improve the database architecture for instruments and so on. So not a whole lot to report, but that's in progress. Back to net.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Dave, KD0EAG. Go ahead, Dave.
I've not been accomplishing too much. Beating my head on working on low power magnetometer code, but had a lot of problems with the development environments, the different compiler IDE setups and things getting scrambled. And as my progress with things slows down, my mind tends to drift. If I'm not going pretty fast, I slowly don't seem to accomplish much. But so I've been really spent the last week trying to get back to where I was the week before that, before I went out of town for a long weekend, and not a lot of satisfaction at the moment. And then I have to go out of town next week. So summer is always problematic, but that's really it for me. I think I'm back to where I'm getting something done.
Okay. And next on the list is Dan, N4XWE. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, thank you, Dave, and good evening, everyone. Kind of in the middle of moving, and that's sort of taken precedent over almost everything else. And I think I'm going to end up in Huntsville initially, and then we'll see what happens after that. So that's the news from here. Back to you, Dave.
Okay. And next on the list is David, N1HAC. Go ahead, David.
Oh, good evening, everyone on the net. Pretty busy these days. Finishing touches for our Baffin Island project, setting up now 2 receivers, one on each of 2 different islands. See if there are any differences in environment. They both have very strong transmitters nearby, so judicious notches and things like that, but that should get deployed soon. We're University of New Brunswick's going to be installing it for us, so we have to get our stuff to them. Continuing to work on the Korean AGO power system for the geophysical observatory that Hyoman's having us work on. That's moving along, and then tomorrow we've got there's a in-person science meeting for a dual CubeSat that I've been involved with at Haystack. That's a HF experiment, basically doing what we do on the ground, but from up there. And that's going to be an interesting one. 2 6U satellites with a vector sensor, as it's being called, which is a set of 3 loops and 3 dipoles that get deployed out of this thing. And still a little bit of trouble with the deployment mechanism, but that's not exactly what we're going to be focusing on tomorrow. It's the science, which is primarily observing auroral roars and hiss and AKR and things like that from above, and then also being used as a interferometer. That's why there are 2 of them. So it's going to be an interesting experiment, proof of concept, maybe flying in a year or 2. Back to Nat.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Hyoman, KD2 MCR.
Hello, can you hear me well? Good evening,
Yes.
everyone. Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, just like Nathaniel, who attended CEDAR meeting, I went to a GEM workshop, which was held in Hawaii as opposed to Austin, Texas. So that made a lot of like CEDAR folks very jealous.
Yeah, I was kind of unhappy with this arrangement.
Usually GEM and CEDAR hold meetings back to back, one except another, so that people, I mean, there are a lot of overlaps, of course. So but this time somehow there was no coordination between the 2 communities. So we hold the 2 workshops at the same times, and then really far away, so no one just could not attend those 2 meetings at the same time. Anyways, yeah, I gave a presentation about our ham-side magnetometer network, which actually received pretty good responses. Nowadays, citizen science is a huge deal. A lot of groups are actually presenting citizen science-based, project, mostly magnetometers or auroral observations and stuff like that. I noticed that a lot of other groups are also using, PNI sensor that we are also using. But my biggest emphasis when presenting the ham-side magnetometer is that we leverage ham radio operators, which can, contribute tremendously. Most of the, I don't want to sort of like underestimate the citizen science power of the citizen science aspect, but the strength that we have right now, which I totally try to emphasize when I was presenting, is that we are leveraging the existing worldwide network of ham radio operators who is already knowledgeable in HF communications, ionospheric disturbances, which can highly tie to this magnetometer measurement. Whereas, I heard like there's some not problem, but the citizen science, like especially if you want to involve like high school students, and then things are not going really smoothly, they don't really know how to do things and stuff. I mean, anyway, I'm not trying to underestimate the power of citizen science anyways, but this is the strength that we have. So that's what I highly emphasize. And also I met Jesper, for those maybe for those who may not know who that person is, he is a scientist, very well pronounced scientist at APL, Applied Physics Laboratory at Johns Hopkins University, who actually operate a data repository called SuperMag, where like worldwide magnetometer data sets are archived in one place and processed, redistribute the data sets. And he actually saw my presentation, and he is also leading a citizen science project. So he is highly interested in, implementing our data set into their the data repository system, which could be hugely synergistic because everyone, especially at GEM community, space science community, knows about SuperMag. So if we can do this, then I think we can make our project much, much more visible. And lastly, I have spoken with him to find out about the quality control, because he is highly experienced in managing lots of different data sets that came from different places. So we have talked about how to perform the quality assurance and stuff like that, and coordinate conversion, which sometimes it's not so well unified. So that kind of stuff, that was very useful too. So yeah, that's the power of meeting with people in person. So I'm happy to report that yeah, we are getting a lot of visibility there. So back to that.
Well, fine business.
Yeah, we had
Go ahead.
Jesper contributed to a number of our sounding rockets in the past. I know Jesper.
Mm-hmm. And also he is now a part of the CubeSat project as well. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next on the list is James, KG4 DSG. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I finally got the video. Evening, Dave and the group. I guess I just saw the email come through about the DCC call for papers. I don't know if I'm on the end of the list, but seems kind of late. What have I been doing? Of course, field day. We had a club member show up on Friday with a brand new Windows 11 laptop, an unassembled dual boom M² VHF UHF, Yaesu ASL rotator, control box. And before dusk on Saturday, we had made a satellite contact. It was actually rather impressive to get it all assembled and working. He was kind of flustered because he didn't really know what he was doing, but he was ecstatic that he actually got the contact. So not much else going on here. We're just kind of relaxing after the weekend. And with that, back to the net.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Joe, W7LUX. Go ahead, Joe. Not hearing you, Joe. There you go.
Okay, works now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Something I didn't do when I plugged in the microphone to the computer. Good evening, everyone. Spent the last couple of weeks helping the local radio club president set up for field day. Setup went great, and the whole object is to be ready in case we do have some kind of a major communications failure. And it turns out that just a few weeks ago, Eastern Arizona got clobbered when somebody somehow destroyed the cable going over to the most of the eastern part of the state. And even 911 calls were not working well. So anyway, we set up went great, and got all ready. And then Mother Nature moved in with rain, which turned to our created mud, and a bit of lightning and some precipitation static. And basically we gave up and shut down early before the real deluge hit. And we aren't complaining because we desperately need the water out here. Anyway, it's been field day and more field day planning and whatever. Back to you, Dave. Thank you.
Fine business. Next on the list is Jonathan, KC3EEY. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. It was a fairly busy week for me. I did some more testing on the Trimble Res 720. So far, I'm getting really good results with the updated GPS decode. Really good performance even on a simple L1 antenna. It's hanging out the window. It's an L1 L5 receiver, but it's actually working really well. So I'm happy with that. I was working on the enclosure more for my EBNOT VLF transmitting rig. Unfortunately, I used the wrong hole saw, and it was too big. So unfortunately, that means that I had to purchase a new enclosure because I couldn't find shims that would make it work with the circular RJ45 connectors that I have. So that's on order. But while that was on pause, I took out my enclosure for my 3-channel VLF receiving system that consists of a Raspberry Pi and an audio injector octo sound card that has 4 input channels. So this way you could connect a GPS pulse per second, a E-field receiver, and a orthogonal B-field receiver, north, south, and east, west loops, and with that you're able to determine bearing of signals and a bunch of other cool stuff. The only drawback or limitation is in when it's capturing 4 channels, the maximum sample rate is 48 kilohertz. So that only leaves me with 24 kilohertz of VLF bandwidth, but so I can't capture a lot of the higher VLF stations, but it's actually pretty impressive for a Raspberry Pi. And speaking of that, so last week I sent an email to the group about the ILDN. It's the Indian Lightning Location Network. I learned that the author of VLFRX Tools, Paul, he was working on this for quite a while, as far back as 2018. So what he was actually designing was a network of VLF receivers, very similar to the VLF receiver that I built and installed at Nathaniel's. It's enclosed in a PVC pipe, and it uses copper tape and foam pipe insulation as the antenna element. And it also uses a Raspberry Pi and a sound card and some supporting circuitry to complete the ensemble. So what Paul was doing, he was actually building a bunch of these receivers and Raspberry Pi boxes, at least 6. And so what he did was he had them installed at different locations in India, and they were capturing time of group arrival data from Spherix. So he has a network with fairly accurate lightning location with using simple Raspberry Pis and audio injector sound cards along with these VLF receivers. So it's actually pretty impressive. It's a really impressive network. So that's my dream, and the benefit or the good thing about VLF-RX tools and these VLF receivers, once we use them with the Whistler catcher, we can not only do lightning location. That's just one thing. So we could do so many other things because the spectrum is being captured, and there are so many utilities in VLF-RX tools that can do quite a bit. So we're talking about natural radio vent capture, capturing SIDS. We could do spheric study. We could there's just quite a lot that can be done with a network of VLF receivers. So that's kind of my dream, my end goal here. That's all I have. Back to the net.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Scotty, WA2 DFI. Scotty, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here. Back from the dead. Yeah, last week wasn't very good. I had both Nona and I got COVID. Second time around, not much fun. So not a lot happened, but a lot of things happened that were started before last week. And I don't know if you mentioned this, Dave, about DCC being live.
No, I haven't, because that was in play. It's happened since the last meeting here that,
Okay. Well, yeah, it's just decided this week, I guess,
yes.
is we're going DCC live in Charlotte. So get your rooms, get your reservations, get your car tuned up, get your new shoes on or something, and be ready for that. So I think that's going to be fun. And also this past week, I received the 500 factory built magnetometer boards from the factory. So now I have lots of work to do. And let's see what else. So yeah, so now I've got a big pile of boards here that I've got to test and get out, and almost no energy to do it because as Dan can attest to, we're moving too. We got the house up for sale in preparation for moving out and into the new place. It's not done yet. So be homeless for a while, get my shopping cart out and load it up with Raspberry Pi or something. So
Are
that's
you
been,
gonna listen to your VW vans?
yeah, I've got enough of those. I can have a 7-room house.
That'd be pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
6 rooms, I guess.
there's probably some really good conversion plans on the internet too.
Yeah. I'm sure I'll have time to do that too. Hey, my conversion consists of sweeping the inside out. That's about as much as I have able to do. Anyway, so we're trying to get ready to move. We got the magnetometers in, and probably the best news for last. ARDC granted us the funds to build the DE Mark II.
Ooh,
Oh,
So-
good.
that's awesome.
So we got that. And as part of that, they granted us funds to build the magnetometers, which of course
Wow.
we already built. So we're going to discuss how we're going to do that, but I'm thinking we're going to try to put it into like a revolving manufacturing fund so that we can, as we build the boards, we take the money out. As we sell the boards, we replenish the money so that at the end of the day, there'll be a little bit extra of markup, but mostly the fund stays there and it's ready for the build of whatever we decide to build next. And so that's kind of my plan. I don't know if that'll work out, but that's what my goal is, to have and if we can keep building that fund up, then we can keep building more and more expensive and more capable boards, because the seems that the things we're building more and more today are more and more expensive. You know, their Whisper boards are nice, but when you get to SDR boards, I mean, if you want capability, it costs you some money. And to build 100 to 500 of them, it costs us a lot of money. So that's a really hard problem to figure out how to get around, to be able to provide low-cost boards to experimenters and everybody in the community. And, you know, without doing a GoFundMe or something like that. So, see, there was something else too, other than the magnetometer and the oh yeah, I talked to the rep, and you're gonna love this. They're actually, Intel has got a move afoot to help people design out Max 10s and design in Lattice FPGAs. This is Intel sponsoring this now. So I'm going
Yeah.
like, that says to me, don't count on any Max 10s anytime soon. Because I mean, if they're telling you to design it out, that's like kind of a desperate move, I think, in order to save customers if they can at all. But, you know, trying to save customers by sending them to your competition isn't a very good strategic move, I don't
Yep.
think.
Well, Scotty, didn't Lime
surprised.
SDR redesign their Lime Mini?
That's right, with a Lattice FPGA. So
Right.
I think we'll take a look at that. And right now, I really think we might focus on other than that we did get the FPGAs in for the data engine, the Max 10s, probably the last Max 10s we'll see in a long time. So the idea is to finish up the data engine hardware, get the FPGA code going, and get those things rolling. And then for the data engine Mark II, you know, we may end up making that the entry level board. I don't see any other way around it other than redesigning the data engine with the Lattice part, or just not worrying about the data engine entry level one for now and just concentrate on the Mark II. It's got a lot bigger FPGA, have 10 gig Ethernet, and you can put a gig Ethernet cartridge in it if you want. It's just more expensive, which is not what we wanted, but it's, you know, maybe what we get until, you know, by the end of the year or by the first quarter of next year. Are we going to see any more Max 10s? And if we don't, then we just junk it and rip it out, put it in the Lattice part instead. So I haven't really, let's go ahead.
How hard is it going to be to redesign for the Lattice?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the Lattice parts to see what's available. My concern is that we're not going to get something that's going to be big enough or powerful enough. And I don't want to, I mean, really, to me, the 50K LEs in the Max 10 is my mark, the low water mark of performance that I want to stick with. So it's got to be at least that high, that most capable. And we got to see what that's going to cost, because if a 50K LE equivalent Lattice part costs significantly more than the Max 10, we might as well just not do a Max 10 and just do the ARIA 10. It's not going to be effective. Now, what we could do is we could do an ARIA 10 on the current data engine platform with all the peripherals and everything that are already designed in. That's a possibility. Depends on where the price point comes in. So
Yeah, I think the thing that's concerning to me is the way this grant went is we're supposed to develop these prototypes. And then I think that, well, certainly the hope is that after we make the working prototypes, we'll be able to actually produce a whole bunch of them. And so if all we can do is make prototypes, and then we can't produce any more, it's going to be really problematic.
it makes the prototype kind of a dead end,
Yeah.
which is not really
Not
where
what we want.
Well,
No.
a proof of concept.
It's a proof of
Yeah.
concept, but even switching to a Lattice part is a mess, because you've got to redo all the FPGA code then.
Right.
And yeah, you don't want to do that if you don't. And if you can keep the cost down of the Mark II low enough, maybe that's an alternative solution, although it's going to be more expensive, but it's also going to be a lot more capable. So, is the entry level, does it justify that cost or not? I don't know. But I guess we can find out, because we'll really end up with two designs, maybe one design that we can't get a part for, which makes it kind of a dead end, and the other one maybe a little more expensive than we want. So we kind of didn't do that well on this, but circumstances are what they are.
Yeah, I think we'll have to have some more conversations about this, because from like the mission of what the project is, we really need to have something that's going to fill that kind of Mark I price point capability. And I would really like to keep in that VLF receiver, the leaf if we can too, because I think Jonathan's put a lot of effort into that, and I think it's a particularly valuable addition.
Yeah, and the other alternative is, we could, if we can't get a Lattice part that can give us the performance we want, we can, dumb it down some and make it usable. So maybe you don't get 8 virtual receivers or 16, you get 4.
Right.
I mean, something like that. And then we still have the capability for VLF. And we still use, I mean, we'll still be using the same modules, the RF module and the clock module and the VLF module. Although on the Data Engine Mark II, there's really not any room for the leaf. Although we could maybe
why isn't there room for the leaf on the Mark II?
because the only way we could make room for the leaf is to expand the size of the board, because you can't fit 2 modules on the board. There's not enough room.
What does that do to the project besides make the board bigger?
What?
Does it make it a lot more? Is there a big reason why we don't want to make the board?
No. In fact, I mean, you could argue it doesn't really make any difference, because the modules are what's important. The baseboard, you know, unless you had a case already made for it, the enclosure doesn't make any difference, except that we have kind of layered it together to come out at 3 layers and use most of the area of all 3 layers. So it becomes a very nice compact system.
Right.
If you, I mean, the other alternative is we could just have 1 SFP module instead of 2.
Okay.
And you could, I think we could fit that on there, and we may have to rearrange things, but when we do a re-layout, we can rearrange things if you can fit them within the same footprint.
Okay.
Or close. So, you know, that's an alternative. I mean, we have to discuss what we want to do there, how important is it to have 2 modules, because the processor, I mean, the FPGA will support 2 hardware wise. So
I mean, another possibility is to put a VLF receiver on one of those, like in the same form factor as an RF module.
That's true.
It's taking up a high-speed bus, which is unfortunate, but then it does give you the option of doing with the RF module. You already get 2 phase coherent HF receivers,
right?
And you can put the other module on, and you get the what do you call it?
You have the 4 VLF receivers.
Yeah.
So,
but then you lose the magnetometer, don't you?
No, because the magnetometer really is going to end up on the Raspberry Pi. I think in the end, it's not. But 1 second, Dave. If you put the leaf on as a VLF receiver, you lose the magnetometer anyway, unless you can stack them somehow. But which we might be able to do. So go ahead, Dave.
well, this is a discussion, and we have one person who hasn't had any comments on the roll call, and we can finish the roll call and open it up.
Okay.
Can I do that?
Yes, go ahead. I'm finished with general stuff.
Okay. The last on the list is Tom in 5 EG. Go ahead, Tom.
Good evening, Dave. Good evening, everyone in the group. It's been a pretty quiet week. I did look a little bit at Quartus 22, which supports the ARIA 10, and they dropped the TCP/IP networking stack starting that version. And so if we go into the ARIA 10, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to do UDP sockets, because that firmware will no longer come for the NEOS processor. I talked a little bit about it with Kong, but not much. And that's about it for the week. So back to the group.
Okay. I did have one small comment that I wanted to make. It's something I forgot to say is I virtually attended the SDR Academy, which is an equivalent meeting in Friedrichshafen, Germany, that is very much like DCC. And the talks on Friday were all about GNU Radio and different modules in GNU Radio, and a lot about using GPU programming within GNU Radio. And then also quite a bit about FPGA programming. Both Friday and Saturday were a lot about the different modules. One of the interesting boards is Lawrence Barker from England, and somebody that works with John Milton quite a bit, for those of you that are open HPSDR people. He's working with Abi, the developer in India, to make something that looks like a Hermes with a PCIe bus to Raspberry Pi Compute Module 4. It's not, he had a development board, but they don't have any for sale.
Hmm.
The code is up on a GitHub that Lawrence has. So just thought I'd report on that.
Sounds good. One thing that I forgot also, Dave, and this is for you, Tom. Part of that grant that was granted by ARDC includes 2 full Cordis licenses that we can network. So we'll have full
Very good.
licenses for 2022 and beyond. So that's good news. That takes care of our ARIA 10 licensing problem.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, ARIA 10 doesn't have any free developer license. So
Right.
that kind of cuts down the volunteer pool, but if you can network the licenses, that helps.
Yep.
Well, Scotty, I just did a quick search at DigiKey. Of course, availability is 0, but Lattice has a 48,000 element, 672 BGA, 372 IOs, varies between $150 and $200 per.
Yeah.
I don't know, is that close to what you would need?
That's similar to the Max 10, but that's I could buy an ARIA 10 for close to that
Cheaper.
price.
Well, and like I said, availability is 0. And
Yeah.
if Intel's pushing people that way, maybe they're offering discounts.
See, this is the big problem I have, is because since we were an Intel developer or are an Intel developer, we got a really good price on the Max 10, but we're not going to get that for the Lattice parts.
No.
So if we go back to paying list price, I might still be better off using an ARIA 10 and getting it,
Getting the deal.
a good deal. And I just don't know. And I don't know what, maybe Lattice has an academic program or something that we could get a good deal on parts through. I don't know. I'm not really, we used to be a Lattice developer years ago. And then we had a customer that came in that was trying to use a Lattice part inappropriately, in an application that Lattice didn't really support, and really gave me a bad taste for Lattice. So I haven't done much with Lattice since then. But I think that was really not Lattice's fault that somebody tried to overuse the part, because we couldn't get the tools to compile the code and meet timing. It just wouldn't work.
Yep.
Because they just picked an application that was too demanding for the part that they picked. And the problem is when you're a design house and you're sponsored by Lattice and a company comes in with a Lattice design, you can't talk them out of it. You can't go in and say, oh no, you should use an Intel part, because that's a way to get your relationship revoked from because they bring you the customer. You got to really try and make it work as best you can. So I couldn't really do anything. I could suggest, but I couldn't really insist. And they ended up canceling the project because they couldn't make it work. We couldn't make it work. One of the few times when we actually couldn't make something work, which is almost never happens. But if we have total control over it, first of all, I never would have picked that part. I would have picked a part that would have been capable to do it. So it was a problem. Anyway,
So I found one other person we haven't talked to. Sorry.
Yeah, actually, and I have a virtual check-in from Kung. He sent me a message that he couldn't make it, but he sent a message and a video for me to play for everyone.
Okay.
Oh, he sent you a video too. Cool.
But did we call on Jim?
No, sir.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I think you jumped around somewhere in the process.
That's okay. I was late. Sorry, I was late. My daughter, who lives here, and her family are up in Canada on vacation, and it was my turn to go over and feed the cat this evening, and I forgot about it until late. So that's why I was late. Apologize.
Well, you get Scotty's okay because he likes cats.
Well, Nemo will appreciate that, Scotty. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to do much of anything because my wife had her shoulder replaced last Thursday. So I've been playing nursemaid, thanks to a lot of help from our other daughters. It has been easy, but I have been tied up. So not really anything to support. I did not go out to field because of that.
Yeah. Nathaniel, you want to
Yeah.
show that video?
Sure. Oh, and I forgot to mention earlier, I did get to field day this weekend too, so that was fun. Here is for Scotty. There's some inspiration for you.
All right.
There's all sorts of good ideas on the internet. And this is the message from Kung. He says, "Hi, Scotty and Dr. Frizzell. I was planning on attending the Telecon today, but something else urgent came up. So I prepared this brief video to update you on the dual configuration I've been working on, which I'll play in a minute. By default, the FPGA loads an image that alternates the top two LEDs. On the other hand, if I turn off the configuration select switch on the back of the board, the FPGA will instead load the lower pair of LEDs. This means the dual configuration is working. The next step is programming the remote system upgrade capability. I found the Quartus example Scotty mentioned. Unfortunately, it is written in an old Quartus version for a different FPGA. Additionally, I'm using Linux, but the image upload UART terminal is shipped as a .exe file, along with a folder of its source code, not written in C, unfortunately. If I manage to adapt the older code to the current Quartus and get the terminal operational, everything should be fine."
If.
Yeah. So there's the message, and then here's the movie. There's the top two LEDs. It's a very dramatic video. Bottom two LEDs. So there, that's the message from Kung.
Well, that's progress.
It is.
FPGA programming is one of those slow processes compared to working a regular computer.
Yes. Isn't it though?
So, yeah, so how is this all going to work then now that we have, so Scotty, the data engines are out for production, right?
Yeah, and actually that's another update I have on those too, is that we went back through, we got the FPGAs. So Nona went back through and she's checking the bill of materials against the parts that we have on hand for the Rev A version. And it turns out there's a bunch of parts that we don't have. Turns out they are easy parts. They're capacitors and you know, stuff that we managed to find all of them and order them, and they're all here. So that will start. And of course, this COVID thing pretty much chopped out 2 weeks of our time. And so it will be in process next week.
Okay,
As soon as we finish doing the inventory of the parts and turn it in. And then we'll have real data engines too. And then the pressure's really on because I got so much going on. And I just couldn't afford to be sick, but you know, that's the way it works.
Yeah, no, I know.
When you are, that's the way it is.
Scotty, I'm curious about what's going on with the Max 10. Is Intel really trying to get people to consider it not recommended for new design? Or are they just trying to get some of their customers steered to Lattice to relieve the pressure on the Max 10?
I don't have any idea because I keep asking my rep, well, what's going on? Where are all these Max 10 parts going? And the answer I got, this is interesting. He says that some big CPU manufacturer who will remain unnamed has designed the Max 10 in to be like a coprocessor, so that every board that they ship that has one of their processors on it has a Max 10 on it. And apparently they are a huge volume manufacturer and they're sucking up Max 10. So here's my guess for the 2 cents that you don't give me that's worth, is that somebody like Qualcomm or Broadcom or some big commodity manufacturer has decided to put a Max 10 in their router, of which they make 100 million of every year, and they're just buying up all the die, and nobody else gets any. And of course, Intel's not going to tell you that. And of course, now what they're telling me is there is a substrate shortage.
Yep.
And the substrate shortage, that what they're doing to ameliorate that is they are actually working on and apparently it's due to, well, okay, so back up a bit. Apparently for the ARIA 10s, there is a big customer that uses a lot of ARIA 10s. And so they're having trouble making ARIA 10s because of the substrate shortage. So they're qualifying a second source for substrates. And that's going to be coming out very shortly. And then this big customer who uses all these ARIA 10s is going to transition over to the new substrates. And all the rest of us poor slobs are going to get to fight over what's current production is. So, but what he's saying is it'll make ARIA 10s a lot more available coming up in the future here. But this says nothing for Max 10s.
Yeah.
So
By substrate, do you mean wafers?
wafers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that, I mean, it's kind of two unrelated issues, but I keep asking him who's buying all the Max 10s, because the production didn't just go to zero. I mean, come on, they're building them, right? And you don't build 5 at a time, you build hundreds of thousands at a time. So who's buying all of them? Well, they're not saying. But it's the first inkling I got that there's a huge user somewhere that's causing this trouble, as well as the supply chain problems just exacerbate it, make it worse. But it's, something besides that.
Yeah, so according to the Intel product catalog, the Max 10 is built by TSMC on their 55 nanometer process. And so of course, TSMC is overloaded. And I suspect, perhaps they may not be giving much attention to the older 55 nanometer wafers.
Right. And they haven't had a chance to ramp up another 55 nanometer line. Although, I mean, and you can see how they probably sell a whole lot more Max 10s than they sell ARIA 10s because they're much cheaper. But on the other hand, they're much cheaper. So they really want to invest in lines that are maybe a little bit more lucrative. The Max 10s are more like, picks. They're very small and common, as opposed to an ARIA 10 or a Stratix. It would be more like a Pentium or a higher end processor.
Yeah, so unfortunately, that puts the production of it, it would sound like, out of Intel's control.
Yeah, and it does. But it also, I mean, TSMC is still making them. So where are they all going? Well, okay, so maybe the production volume isn't increasing as fast as the demand is, but I mean, it wasn't very gradual. It seemed to me it just shut off overnight. It's on high, and now, according to my rep, the Max 10 is on what they call hard allocation, which means when you place an order, you're a customer, you place an order with, say, Arrow Electronics. Arrow goes to Intel and says, this order is for customer X. And it gets allocated based upon customer X. So there's no DigiKey going in and saying, give me 10,000 parts. You have to have a customer or you don't get any parts. They're allocating them directly to customers. And as opposed to the ARIA 10, which is, it's on allocation, but not hard allocation, which means that distributors can buy them without a specific customer. And although distributors don't seem to keep them in stock either, at least it's better, because when I tell the guy I want to buy some Max 10s, after the laughter subsides, he says, put the order in and we'll tell you later whether you can get any ever. That's what he tells me. If you don't have an order in, don't bother calling me, because I can't allocate anything to you unless there's an order on the books. So as an example, we have another customer that we designed an FPGA, a Max 10 in, and we ordered parts, they ordered parts, but it's a medical device, so we have nothing to do with the manufacture of it anymore. It has to be done through an ISO 9002 certified medical manufacturer. but we're still in the loop because we're helping them substitute parts when they can't find them. And FPGAs, of course, is one that they can't find. And they ordered in, I'm going to say February or March. And not until this month do they actually get the date that they're going to get some. And they're going to get half of their order in September. September 19th is the date that they got. Now, I'm expecting that'll be reasonably good because that's what happened with our Max 10s. Once they give us an actual date, they pretty close to stick to that date. That's the factory ship date from Intel. And who knows when they're going to get the rest of their parts because they're only getting half what they asked for. So, but again, we did not even find out that the date was going to be September until about a week ago. Because they said, "Oh, it's too soon. It's not on the allocation tables yet."
Well, I'm facing the exact same problem on a router. I put the order in at the beginning of the year, and they won't even forecast a date yet on a router. So
yeah,
I don't think there's any FPGAs on it. It's got some other kind of unobtainium somewhere on it. But the key issue here, I think we may need to talk offline, a couple of us, and kind of roadmap what we think we ought to do, right? Yeah, because my view is we've got some hard decisions to talk through, and it's not clear what the right answers are.
Yeah. I'm really concerned that, we'll get a no cost extension this year, but I'm really concerned that at the end of this, we want to show something that works, which I think, we'll be able to show something that works with the Max 10 that we have in the data engine, which will be great, but it's not gonna, and then if they say, oh, that's wonderful, now let's order, 100 of these, or like, that's gonna really not fly.
And the big problem is the whole point of building 25 of these and testing them and getting them to work is that we could build 100 or 200 or 500. If we switch to FPGAs, then we're back to square one of testing the new design all from ground zero again.
Yeah, so you have to remember, a third of the effort is getting the prototype up and running, and 2/3 of the effort is fixing all the rough edges, fixing the why doesn't it boot, and customer support, and all the kinds of problems. And so, we probably need to sit down and think out a plan.
Yeah, the 1090 rule, right?
Yeah, and it's that case. If we're not going to put him into production, we need to draw a line at how far we go with the work.
Yeah, because I'm really I'm really concerned if we're not going to be able to get any more of these.
But there is a good thing that we can say about this is we have a reasonably good specification for the dotted line between the data engine and the Raspberry Pi or the host computer. So if the non-host PC part of it ends up changing significantly, we still have this specification. If we need that, then we've got a substitute. So that helps us some, although it doesn't help us achieve that, implement that on a new piece of hardware. At least, and see, my view is like, maybe Tom, you're a little light on the 1/3 of the effort. I think it's more like 20% of the effort is getting the prototype up and running. And there's tons of work that Bill has done and that Bill still has to do once we get some hardware that actually produces data. And Tom, you got tons of verification to do once you get raw data from the ADCs. And that stuff hasn't even started yet because we don't have hardware yet.
How well does the firmware cross over from the Max 10 to the Aria 10 to whatever else?
Reasonably well between those two because the tool set's the same.
Yeah, the one problem is that Intel deprecated all the TCP/IP networking stuff in the NEOS code. So when you move to the Aria, you don't have that available anymore, and that was hard to find. As in, what's on the Max 10 was the only place I could find it.
Why couldn't you take?
TCP/IP is so ubiquitous. Why would that be
Oh.
deprecated?
It's right in Intel's Quartus release notes for
Okay, but
22.1.
that's just Neos code, isn't it? Why doesn't that port right over to the Neos on the ARIA 10? It's the same
Well,
Neos.
all of that code talks to all the device drivers, which talk to all the peripheral functions in the chip. And so I think that's quite a bit more complex than you might anticipate.
Yeah, I believe it.
I'm still confused. You said why did they deprecate this? Did they deprecate like the free version? And so now you can still get it, but you have to pay for it, or
Well, my reading of the release note, and I sent that to Kong, and he saw it as well, is that they said they've removed the niche stack intellectual property from, I think it's Quartus 22.1 or something like that going forward. So the niche stack stuff was TCP/IP about 1998 or something like that. I know there's a bunch of security holes in it. And I don't know if Intel's license agreement only took it out a certain number of years or a certain number of revisions. I don't know the reasoning, it wasn't in there, but the document just said that stuff has been removed from Quartus.
Did you say you had a notice to that effect, Tom?
Let me go find the document and I'll put a link to it.
but
Yeah.
I would presume that a lot of people would be using TCP/IP. So what do they propose as an alternative?
Yeah, so anyway, when I saw that, that was somewhat of a large red flag.
Are you
A
sure?
lot
that-
of times,
Are you sure that
Nathaniel,
Intel's not going to acquire Lattice?
yeah, that would be,
Why not?
that would make sense, especially if they're advocating designing Lattice in place of Max 10. That could be a very good indicator, Dave.
Yeah, I've been wondering that.
But to answer Nathaniel's question, Intel and / Altera deprecates stuff all the time, much to the trouble of everyone using it. I mean, we know for a fact that when you switch Quartus versions, there's some things that just go away and there's no replacement for them. And you wonder what is in their mind. What are they thinking when they take something away like TCP/IP? Come on, really? I mean,
Yeah.
that's like not some trivial little thing that you can just slap down in a day.
Right.
Well, there has to be other IP out there. I just can't believe it.
Well, I'm wondering if they haven't moved it into the pay version, and if that's the case, we can probably get hold of that.
Yeah, that's
Now,
true.
here's a question though, a philosophical question. Once we pay for a license, like ARDC has given us a grant to do, and we start putting in proprietary code, proprietary IP, what does that do to the open source nature of our code? Because it doesn't really stay all open source then.
But
Because
the IP is going to be binary, right?
well, we all get to use it, but if you want to consider it truly open source, where I can go look at the source code, suck it down into my computer, compile it, and use it, you can't do it without a full license.
Yeah, that's
So how
true. But I think it's going to be a binary with an API.
Well, but traditionally the paid IP is a black box, semi-compiled, if you will, so
Yeah.
that you can't look inside it, you can't see how it works, you can parameterize it, but you can't actually compile it without a license. And if they do that same thing, how does that affect our everything's open source mantra?
But I have to believe that all the IP is licensable by anyone. It has to be. I mean, that's why those guys are in business, is to make money off of selling their IP.
Well, yeah, but if it's Intel IP and they just see an opportunity to now charge for something that used to be free, then
Yeah.
we may be able to license it as part of our networked license. In which case, the developers would be able to use it. It's just that not everyone would be able to use it. But when you think about it, even with the ARIA 10, even with regular compiles, we are not in the free zone anymore. We're in the paid license zone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's unfortunate. So in other words, a user couldn't buy a Data Engine Mark II and say, throw out all that code, that open source stuff. I'm going to design my own code. Well, you can, but you got to have a license. Otherwise, you can't compile the code.
Yeah.
And the licenses are not conducive to amateurs buying a seat because they're like $5,000.
Okay, I just sent in the chat, I sent a link to the deprecated features of Quartus 22, and the TCP IP stack is down there about at the bottom of the page.
Not seeing.
So that was a pretty old stack, actually. I've noticed one thing when running it in OpenHPSDR mode, it auto allocates UDP socket ports, and it does it in a weird way. It allocates them down around port 2000 and up. And of course, today, everyone allocates them up at around port 49,000 and up. And so that's just because that stack is pretty old, and that's the way things used to work about 20 years ago. So there were a lot of security holes found in the stack, but my hope was, we'd have that whole interface and stack behind a firewall, because you wouldn't want to put that stack on the internet. It wouldn't last very long.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a link to that, to the deprecated list. There's quite a few things, but I think that's the one that probably affects us the most.
Not seeing it.
It's down at the bottom.
Took me a minute to find it.
This is probably not.
Is that the only TCP IP support, or is that just one version that's been taken out?
That was the only one I was able to find in 5 months of searching.
I know this is probably crazy talk, but how hard is it to write our own TCP/IP stack?
It is, a lot of it is device driver code. For example, the stack talks to the DMA controllers, which are also Intel intellectual property. And so a lot of what's in there is bit banging the DMA controllers and managing the memory allocation buffers. And then those go over and bit bang the memory interface, the DDR3 memory interface. So there's a lot of pretty low level bits flying between all of these IP controllers, which of course are all encrypted. We don't have a look inside them because without the license, you can't see the gates that are inside. That's made the debugging kind of a challenge.
Not very friendly for development.
It's probably, once you get the pro license and you have a license, then you get to see the gates that are inside the intellectual property. And if you're a really sharp FPGA developer, that can probably show you how to debug what you want. The question is, we're really not using TCP at all. We're just using UDP. And the question is there some other solution? I didn't find anything off the shelf that I could use with the Max 10. This was the only thing I could find that I was able to get up and get running. So anyway, yeah, I think we need to noodle a little bit because there's some really unclear questions here.
Yeah, I'm seeing things pop up about a year ago about vulnerabilities in that stack.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's related.
Yeah, there were quite a few. It's pretty old stack.
Yeah, I see that on the Wikipedia page.
It's got to be another one.
I looked at there was a version of Linux ported to the Max 10, and I tried to build that. And I was able to use, there's a boot kit builder. I was able to run the boot kit builder, U-boot, I think it was. I don't remember. But I was never able to get the Linux to compile. and they had ripped out the ELF file from the build. So it was, you could not reverse engineer the Linux code. But the Linux code took, I think, 49,000 LEs to run a minimal version of Linux. And so that didn't leave any LEs to do anything else anyway. So I spent about a month trying to get Linux up and running on the board, but I was not able to do it because the couple of the key files were missing. So it may be that, Intel has a vendor program for, stacks, or else it may be something that's UDP only. Maybe that's a lot simpler job.
One thing I noticed, that release, those release notes that you gave are for Quartus Prime Pro Edition.
Okay.
That's not the edition we use. We use the standard edition.
Right. But when you go to 22.1, I think, and ARIA, I think you have to use the licensed version.
You do, but the standard is the licensed version.
Okay.
There's a pro and a standard, and both of them will do ARIA 10. But if you want to go to the different ARIA parts, you have to use the standard edition. The pro edition doesn't support it. So we may still be all right.
Yeah, you're going to have to search, because I found a different release note about the deprecation, and I think it was the standard edition, but I can't find that in a quick search tonight. I pointed it out to Kong, and he'd seen the same thing, and so we'll have to do some more searching and see if I can find the one that references the standard edition.
Okay, let me.
Have you ever heard of a TCP/IP stack known as lightweight IP? That's being shown in a design example for Max 10.
LWIP runs on there. There's a LWIP is one of the standard embedded IP stacks.
Yeah.
It's open source too.
And yeah, it's open source. It's used everywhere for things. But there are others. And there's the possibility, I don't know if it makes any sense. I'm a little lost in some of this, of using something like an RTOS on the NIOS that has its own IP stack. Does that make any sense at all? I may be delusional on that. Like Zephyr.
Yeah, I found a Q&A on the Intel FPGA forum, and one of the folks said, starting with ARIA 10, a new TCP IP stack is planned for a future release of Intel Quartus to replace niche stack. When is that available? And the responder just said they think maybe it'll be a derivative of Apache, but they weren't sure. And that was the only, I'm going to have to do some searching, but I think it's going to prop up as an issue.
Yeah, it's probably going to be available on the 12th of Never.
A derivative of Apache?
It'll become available when we get our shipment of was it 2500 Max 10 FPGAs.
Yeah, you might ask Kong. He had seen the same thing that I saw, and so the two of us at least saw it. Maybe we both looked at the wrong thing, but the two of us looked at it.
I'm looking at the Quartus Prime Standard Edition software and device support release notes. Same thing that you were looking at, but for the Standard Edition, and there's no mention of a removal of the TCP/IP stack. So, and you got to be careful because we're not using the Pro Edition. We're using the Standard Edition. There's the Lite, which is free, which does not cover ARIA 10, and then there's the Standard, which covers ARIA 10 and above, and then there's the Pro, which covers certain select. It came out that when the Pro came out, it covered only ARIA 10, and the ARIA 10 SoC. So I don't know what they're trying to do here, but the Pro version is not the one we're going to use.
Can you ask your FE people those questions?
Yeah, I can, but I'm looking at it right now online and it's, I see the same document that Tom had, but for the standard edition, it mentions no removal of that feature.
Why would you, what about this lightweight IP stack since it's open source?
Yeah, one of the key things about the stack is it has to actually integrate with the FPGA hardware because it has to talk to DMA controllers. It's got to talk to a RAM controller. And so ideally, you'd like a stack that has been integrated with the intellectual property, like the Ethernet, MAC, IP, and all of that stuff. If that's not happened, then it's a significant effort to do.
But if they said there were, someone said there were like flow diagrams that showed the Max 10 and the lightweight IP, and on the Wikipedia page it says it's used by many manufacturers.
Take
of embedded
a look
systems.
at what I just put in. That's where I saw it. See if that, I can't tell if it's running on the Max 10 or externally.
This is a 2021 document.
It's running on a free RTOS operating system.
Yeah. See,
yeah, it's in the Max 10. I see it in the yeah.
Free RTOS or Zephyr, you know, those things all definitely have TCP/IP stacks.
Yeah, the Zephyr, I looked at that and there was a big issue with it. I don't remember what it was. There was some major issue with it. Oh yeah, it didn't, Zephyr, the one platform it didn't work with was the Max 10. So the free RTOS, I don't know if that's the micro C RTOS. If so, then that stack's what we're using right now, or what I've got on the prototype.
Free RTOS has been acquired, I believe, by Amazon.
Yeah, but it's still free.
Yeah, it's still free, but.
Yeah, well, there is a free RTOS in Quartus 21. And I looked at that and didn't put it in, but I put in the stack component, and they're separate. You can put the RTOS in with or without. I've got a little bit of the RTOS in what I've got on running on the development kit, and that's uses the niche stack component. So I don't know how Lightwave IP integrates with the RTOS and the NEOS.
I believe it's one of the oldest stacks for embedded uses around.
Certainly from looking at the flow diagram on Intel's website, it looks like it would integrate well, but that's very.
Yeah, so anyway, my concern is we need to look at that for the ARIA. And I can't find the note for the standard edition support. But that's again, you know, the 20% of the work is in the prototype and the 80%'s taking all the bugs out of it.
I just like
if we have to do that twice, it's an issue.
Just throw a question out. We don't even have to discuss it or whatever, but the goal was to use denias because it comes with the development tool, correct? And that gives you the microprocessor IP to run in the FPGA. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, that runs the data engine to local host protocol. It's a UDP socket-based protocol. And so it runs in there, and the processor queues the DMA registers and queues all of that stuff so that the FPGA is shuttling the high-speed memory buffers to and from the receiver module, not by actually moving stuff in and out of RAM, but by moving buffer pointers so that the NEOS doesn't, you know, has to do the minimum amount of work and the hardware does the actual high-speed IO.
But the code you're going to be writing is going to be basically bare metal NIOS, right?
Yeah, it's C, it's written in C on the NIOS. And so it brings up the stack. It parses the DELH protocol headers and figures out what to do things. That's all in C.
Please call it NEOS, not NIOS.
NIOS. I understand what you're doing, and it's probably the most performant option out there, but throwing something like RTOS in the middle would give you some portability and some flexibility on the code. I don't know what that entails at this point. Apparently free RTOS is available for that processor, but it may slow things down to the point where it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so it's the one that came bundled with the Quartus stools is a very lightweight RTOS. And the parts of it I'm using are about as lightweight as you could possibly get an RTOS.
I'll do a little research. I've heard some audio discussion in the recent past about RTOS development, and it's got some very nice features, at least some of them do, that abstract a lot of the hardware out of the way, and handles a lot of the race conditions that you might run into.
Yeah, and that's what I've currently got on. It does a lot of that as well. It's got mutexes and tasks and a bunch of things like that is currently what's in the code.
Okay.
You know what we really need is we really need somebody on this team who is a ham who works for Intel.
That's a good point.
Such a person might exist. I mean, who says, well, I'm a ham, I can help you with this, and maybe I can pull a few strings. I mean, is that foolish to investigate that, or?
Is that like, trust me, I work for Intel?
Well, I mean, I'm talking about someone who could make something happen to help us. That's all I'm talking about. If that doesn't pass the laugh test, then forget it. But I just thought it just occurred to me.
Well, and I mean, it's not just works for Intel, but it's got to be Intel at the right department.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
And identify.
I know the son of Intel who's a ham, but I don't know if that helps us. Bob Noyce's son, Bill.
Get him on here.
Yeah, he might help.
Well, networking is sometimes better than all the strategizing in the world.
Mhm.
So.
Okay,
I can't remember if he actually ended up working for Intel because he worked for DEC for a long time.
Scotty, I'm looking on the download center and I don't see any Quartus standard edition later than 21.1.
That is correct.
Okay.
That's the latest standard.
All right.
The latest standard does all devices. If you look at it, it will do all Intel devices. The Pro Edition will do Stratix 10, Aria 10 GX, and Cyclone 10. That's
okay.
it.
Right. So the deprecation is version 22 and above.
Okay, but they haven't gotten to 22 of standard edition, and it may or may not be deprecated when they get there.
Okay.
So, and standard edition is what we're going to get the licenses for.
Okay.
So.
Well, that's what I'm developing on 20.7.
Okay.
I believe it's 20.7. Hang on, let me fire it up.
Is there a problem with just sticking with 20.7?
No, if it'll, support ARIA devices, I guess not.
Well, let's see if it will.
I don't know how the light and the standard compare. Okay, I'm running 20.1.0 build 711 light edition.
Okay, let's see how far back you can go. And, oh, and by the way, the Pro supports the Agilex series, and the Agilex, I believe, are the Intel CPU cores integrated with FPGAs. So,
Well, okay. So at any rate, okay, if 21, version 21, so I haven't tried porting version 21 to Ubuntu. I was able to get 20.7 up on Ubuntu, or I forgot the number already. I was able to get version 20.1 ported to Ubuntu. And Kong was having problems with the later version. He said he was not able to get it to run on Ubuntu.
the of the light edition.
Yeah, he was looking for the light edition, and he, I wrote the porting instructions and put them up on the TangerineSDR wiki, and it was for version 20.1. And I think he tried 21, and he said he was not able to get it to work on Ubuntu. He had to put it on some version of Red Hat.
Interesting. Okay.
But, whether my instructions were bad and it works fine, or it doesn't work, I don't know. We haven't tried that.
Yeah, I'm looking. I found the release notes. Oh, that's the Pro edition. Never mind. It's, you think that they could find a different name than just tacking Pro onto it just to confuse the hell out of everyone.
Yeah, we may have timed out this discussion here tonight, but okay. I had just looked at the Pro Edition release notes, so
Yeah, it's a standard edition is the one we're going to want. I remember going through this with our local rep because I was trying to figure out which version we should buy the license for, the network license. And it turns out the Pro sounds like the Pro would be the best one if you're going to pick the Cadillac, right? But it's not. So
okay.
it's very limited into parts that it will support. So I'm trying to go back to see how far back and how far back versions of Quartus will support the ARIA 10. Let's see, latest. If they give you the latest, but they don't give you the. Okay, let's see. Okay, your standard edition. So you're saying 20.1 is the one you're using?
Yeah, I'm using 20.1.0.
Okay, let's see.
And that's the package that I sent to Kong. I gave him the zip of the 5,200 files. It's amazing that it takes that many files.
Yeah. Okay. ARIA 10 AX027 is supported by 20.1.
Okay. So we have a viable development path then.
Right, and if we go back to, I've been using 17.1 because it works better than a lot of the newer versions.
Yeah, but yeah, I tried 17.1, but I couldn't port it to Linux. That's when I got stuck in the dual booting Windows and Linux and flipping back and forth between them and copying the files.
The ARIA 10 AX027 is also supported by 17.1. So that means all later versions will have it also up through the current. But I'm surprised because I have an Ubuntu Linux system sitting to my left that has 17.1 on it.
Yeah, I had 17.1 working as well, but there's problems.
Okay. One of the things that I found is, and this doesn't bode well for your desktop computer, if you start with a blank slate, and this works best with virtual machines, install Linux right out of the box, no mods, no nothing. Don't load any other applications, and then install the Quartus software on it. You have much better luck than if you try installing other things, because you end up getting dependencies that are broken and paths that are wrong and just lots of trouble.
Yeah, I ran through a lot of that. I traced it down to Java 8 was the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, and I ended up, the sim linking is all messed up in Java 8, and I ended up re-sim linking a bunch of things to get Quartus to talk to Java 8 and to get the debugger. And so I had to build a bunch of messy sim links to get all that to work.
Yeah,
But
I remember one of the things that I had to do for 17.1 on Linux was I had to load a bunch of 32-bit libraries because they hadn't converted everything over to 64-bit yet. And so
Right.
you have 64-bit Linux, but yet you don't have all the functions you need on 64 bits. So you had to load these libraries and you had to do it manually.
Yeah, I tried that to get Model Sim to work, but I was never able to get Model Sim to work. I had to enable 32-bit architecture on Linux and build all of that, but I was not able to get that function. It worked fine on Windows. Windows of course, would not build the DDR3 controller, and the DMA controller engines are incompatible between the versions. So there's all kinds. Well, yeah, we went through that about a year ago. There's a lot of messy bits in there.
Yeah, yeah. So we ought to modify the amount of time required and include a 25% for messing with the tools.
Well,
or maybe more.
Yeah, but it goes back to Nathaniel's main point, right? What are we trying to accomplish? And how much time do we want to put in? If it's the same tools and the same software loads, then the data engine 1 may make sense because we can make forward progress on stuff that will then port over. If, however, we cannot use the libraries and tools for data engine 2, then we need to sit back and rethink the path forward.
Well, it certainly would be a lot easier to go from data engine 1 to data engine 2 if you use the same manufacturer's part. If we switch to Lattice, then nothing's going to be. I mean, the raw code will be the same, but anything that depends on hardware is going to be different, and that'll be the problem with the Quartus tool when you go from a Max 10 to an ARIA 10. Things like the PLLs are different. The number of them is different. The location is different. The transceiver locations are different. I mean, there's a lot of hardware things that are different that you'll have to fix, but it's not like starting over. It's just like, you got to fix it.
Yeah, so at any rate, that's why my opinion is we need to step back and rethink what we're doing here.
Agreed.
Okay.
And speaking of stepping back, I have to step back here.
Wait, Scotty, before you go.
Yo.
I'm not leaving you without another vision.
Can I buy that right now?
Sounds pretty nice.
Okay, I want an address I can send one of my vans to and have it come back looking like that.
There might be some on here. Reinventing the VW microbus for the eco age. Get like a solar panel on top.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is great in theory, but in reality, it's not. Because one solar panel, that's great for your lighting. Now, what do you do for your stove and your heating and your cooling and?
Right. Well, it looks like you can get a new one for $130,000.
Oh, great.
So,
compared to the cost of my house, that's cheap.
there you go.
I like the rotor blades on the top of that thing. You can put a motor in there and take off vertically.
Where do you see that?
The two white things sticking out there.
Oh, you mean the wings?
Yeah, those. Yeah, you spin those real fast and you can go vertical.
Oh, jeez. A VTOL bus. That's what I need.
I turn off the recording here.
That looks like the Buzz though, the new bus. Sort of a combo between the new bus and the old bus.
Yeah.
So is this a real vehicle or is